August 19, 1944. At the Wehrmacht's command headquarters in East Prussia, General Oberst Alfred Jodl studied the latest intelligence updates from the disintegrating Western Front. His operations staff had carefully calculated the logistics stretching over 400 miles from the Normandy beaches to General Patton's spearheading Third Army. According to their estimates, the Americans had advanced too far, too fast. Their supply lines were overstretched, their logistics unable to keep up. Patton's momentum, they predicted, would falter within days, perhaps even hours. No fighting force, they reasoned, could maintain such rapid progress without fuel. From his post at Hitler's Wolfschanze headquarters, Jodl analyzed what every seasoned German commander already understood through experience. An armored division on the move consumed roughly 150,000 gallons of fuel per day. The Americans were now operating nearly 400 miles from their supply depots. The mathematics, to Jodl, were undeniable. Patton's Third Army would inevitably run dry, its advance grinding to a halt, giving the Wehrmacht precious time to regroup along the Seine and possibly hold out until winter. What Jodl could not have known was that just 125 miles away, an astonishing 5,958 trucks were already rumbling eastward in an unbroken chain of movement. Headlights blazing through the night in open defiance of standard military practice. They carried over 2,500 tons of supplies every single day. This was the Red Ball Express, a logistical operation so daring, so unprecedented that it shattered every established belief of German military science. Within 72 hours, the stalled Patton would crash through German defenses along the Seine. Within a week, Paris would be liberated, and within a month, American armor would reach the German frontier. The finest minds in the Wehrmacht were about to be taught a humbling lesson in logistics, one that would redefine modern warfare itself. It was delivered by over 23,000 truck drivers, 3/4 of them African-American, who transformed a one-way highway network into the most efficient military supply route in recorded history. The German general staff's confidence in predicting an American logistical collapse came from decades of experience and observation. After all, the Wehrmacht had invented blitzkrieg, revolutionized combined arms warfare, and knew all too well the merciless grip of supply lines. Their own conquests had repeatedly stalled when logistics failed to match battlefield success. In Russia, the German advance had not initially faltered due to Soviet resistance, but because their supply system collapsed over the sheer distance. German trucks broke down on the harsh Russian roads, and horse-drawn wagons, still accounting for 80% of German army transport, could not keep pace with their tank spearheads. The differing railway gauges meant supplies piled up hundreds of miles behind the Frontbeck General der Panzertruppe Heinrich Freiherr von Lüttwitz, who would soon command the ex-Scharpin Panzer Corps in September 1944, had written the previous July. The Americans faced the same logistical impossibility we met in Russia. Their mechanical advantage will become their downfall. Machines require fuel, ammunition, and spare parts. They've advanced 400 miles in just 30 days. History tells us what comes next. Paralysis. German intelligence had tracked American consumption rates with near scientific precision. A single Sherman tank burned half a mile's worth of fuel per gallon on roads, and much worse, off-road. An infantry division needed 700 tons of supplies daily. An armored division required over 1,000 tons. Patton's Third Army commanded 12 divisions stretched across a 60-mile front. The arithmetic was brutal. 12,000 tons every day, hauled nearly 400 miles inland across bomb-damaged roads. Through a transport network, the Germans themselves had wrecked during their retreat. General Major Siegfried Westphal, who would later become Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt, calculated on August 20th. Even if the Americans possessed limitless trucks, which they do not, and flawless roads, which they certainly do not, and no mechanical breakdowns, which is impossible. They still could not sustain Patton's advance for more than 48 hours. Physical laws cannot be broken, not even by American industry. But at 2:00 p.m. on August 25, 1944, inside a requisitioned French chateau near Le Mans, Lieutenant Colonel Laurent Ayers of the Motor Transport Service addressed a room filled with skeptical officers. The numbers on the board were merciless. Patton's Third Army was consuming fuel and ammunition faster than any army in recorded history, moving at speeds that defied every known logistical formula. Conventional supply methods, rail transport, scheduled convoys, depot-to-unit distribution had collapsed entirely under the strain. "Gentlemen," Ayers declared, "we are going to create a one-way highway running straight from Cherbourg and the beaches to the front lines. Every vehicle will operate 20 hours a day. There will be no stops, except for fuel or emergencies. We will move no less than 12,500 tons every 24 hours. The name came from railroad terminology. A Red Ball freight train was an express shipment that received absolute priority above all others. The Red Ball Express would adopt that same rule. Total priority, zero delays, no exceptions. The technical design defied all German understanding of warfare. 2 parallel one-way highways, one dedicated to fully loaded trucks heading to the front, and the other for empty trucks returning. Operations would continue around the clock, headlights on, ignoring blackout rules entirely. The Red Ball Express enforced a strict rule. No stops were permitted except for refueling or mechanical breakdowns. Convoys moved at 5-minute intervals, maintaining an average speed of 35 miles per hour. Mobile repair units were stationed every 50 miles, while military police checkpoints removed any vehicle that dropped below 25. Colonel Charles O. Thrasher, commanding officer of the Advanced Section Communications Zone, reviewed the operational estimates. "We'll need at least 140 truck companies," he concluded. "A minimum of 5,958 vehicles running at 90% readiness." By any conventional logistics standard, such numbers were unthinkable. Impossible, according to every textbook ever written. And yet, within 36 hours, that impossibility became reality. On August 26, 1944, the drivers of the 3916th Quartermaster Truck Company climbed into their GMC CCKW 2.5-ton trucks, affectionately called the Deuce and a Half, each one loaded with 105mm artillery shells destined for Patton's batteries near Melun, 300 miles to the east. The makeup of the Red Ball Express defied every Nazi racial assumption. Of the 23,000 drivers who eventually manned the route, roughly 75% were African American soldiers, serving in a still segregated U.S. Army men, who were barred from eating in white. Cafes or using white facilities across much of their own country were now keeping one of history's most celebrated generals supplied and moving. Within hours, these drivers forged a unique identity and culture. They painted bold slogans across their trucks: Patton's Blood Bank, Hitler, Here We Come, Detroit to Berlin Express. They made their own rules of the road. Slower vehicles pulled aside at once, disabled trucks were shoved into ditches, and anything moving under 20 miles per hour was branded a roadblock. By August 28th, German reconnaissance units began transmitting reports of something they had never seen before. Observation teams from Aufklärung Battalion 116 radioed from vantage points overlooking the main Red Ball route, continuous vehicle column, headlights visible for 20 kilometers, no spacing, no blackout discipline, estimated flow, 1,000 vehicles per hour. The Americans have abandoned all tactical. Caution. Such behavior violated everything ingrained in German military doctrine. Driving with lights on at night was an open invitation to err. Attack. Continuous columns offered perfect targets for artillery. And without spacing, A single wrecked truck could block an entire road. But the Americans seemed utterly unconcerned. General Lieutenant Edgar Feuchtinger, commander of the 21st Panzer Division, personally observed the Red Ball Express through concealed positions on August 30th. His report to Army Group B headquarters carried a tone of disbelief and alarm. The enemy operates a supply system beyond our comprehension. Vehicles pass every 30 seconds, day and night, without pause. They do not hide, they do not disperse. They do not follow any principles we recognize. This is not military science, it is industrial mass. Production turned into warfare. What German commanders failed to grasp was that American logistics followed a completely different philosophy. Where German doctrine prized secrecy, the Americans trusted an overwhelming volume. Where the Wehrmacht preserved its trucks, the Americans anticipated 20% mechanical losses and planned replacements accordingly. Where Germans enforced rigid procedures, the Americans relied on constant improvisation. The performance figures achieved by the Red Ball Express shattered every German calculation of logistical possibility. During its first week, August 25th through 31st, 1944, the convoys delivered 89,939 tons of supplies. The daily average 12,948 tons. Each round trip covered 686 miles, but nearly 5,958 vehicles completed 1.5 trips per day. Fuel consumed by the operation itself totaled over 300,000 gallons. When German logistics analysts later captured these statistics from American files, they dismissed them as exaggerated propaganda. But the data was genuine, and the numbers were climbing even higher. By September 5th, the Red Ball Express had reached a rhythm that seemed impossible to German. Officers still dependent on horse-drawn wagons for 80% of their own transport, convoys, departed every 5 minutes from the western terminus. The average convoy comprised 67 trucks, each carrying a standard load of 5 tons, often overloaded to 7. The 350-mile journey to the front took roughly 14 hours each way, with a 2-hour turnaround at either end. At any given moment, around 5,000 vehicles were in motion simultaneously. Innovation became routine. As drivers and mechanics encountered new problems, they invented new solutions. Challenges that German engineers had once labeled insurmountable. Roughly 800 trucks broke down every day, but mobile maintenance teams repaired them on the roadside. A triage method was introduced, 15 minutes to fix the issue, or the truck was pushed off the route to clear the way for the next. When a vehicle broke down beyond repair, its usable parts were stripped and reused to keep others running. Engines were replaced in just 45 minutes using mobile cranes. If the designated Red Ball route became congested, drivers simply carved out alternate paths on their own. They commandeered abandoned French buses to transport personnel and free up trucks for cargo. Runs, captured German vehicles were repainted an olive drab and pressed into service, destroyed. Bridges were bypassed with makeshift detours, their roadbeds built from the rubble of bombed towns. To the Germans observing this apparent chaos that somehow produced efficiency, the sight was incomprehensible. Their own logistics doctrine was rooted in meticulous planning, scheduled maintenance, and adherence to strict procedure. The Americans ignored every one of those rules. Yet their system didn't collapse. It accelerated. The most astonishing revelation for German analysts came from the Americans' management of fuel. The Red Ball Express consumed 300,000 gallons of gasoline each day just to sustain itself, more than many entire German armies received for all operations combined, and yet fuel never ran out. That was because the Americans had engineered a second miracle, Operation Pluto, pipelines under the ocean. They had laid undersea fuel lines across the English Channel, invisible to German intelligence. By September 1944, fuel was flowing directly from Britain to mainland Europe through pipes the enemy didn't even know existed. Forward, fuel depots were positioned every 25 miles along the Red Ball route, dedicated. Tanker convoys operated alongside the main supply lines, ensuring that no truck ever waited more than 10 minutes to refuel. General Major Walter Warlimont, studying aerial reconnaissance photos, could hardly believe the scale of it. The Americans have fuel depots larger than our entire strategic reserves, he wrote. They burn more gasoline transporting gasoline than we allocate to an entire panzer division. This is not warfare as we understand it. It is industrial overflow. The Red Ball Express didn't merely keep Patton's advance alive, it multiplied its momentum exponentially. German military theory held that an armored division could advance 20 to 30 miles a day under the best conditions. But with the Red Ball Express fueling them, Patton's divisions were covering 40 to 60 miles daily, and doing so for weeks at a time. On September 1st, 1944, the U.S. 4th Armored Division advanced 35 miles during its morning assault, paused briefly at noon to refuel, where Red Ball trucks were already waiting with fuel and ammunition, and then pushed another 32 miles by nightfall. That 67-mile single-day advance shattered German defensive planning, which assumed a maximum daily movement of 30 miles. General Oberst Heinz Guderian, reviewing these reports from East Prussia, at first refused to believe them. No armored formation can advance 60 miles a day for an entire week, he argued. Mechanical failures alone would make it impossible. These are propaganda figures, or errors in identification, but intercepted American radio. Transmissions confirmed the truth. Even more astonishing to German commanders was the fact that U.S. units were broadcasting their positions openly, without encryption, utterly confident that their speed outmatched any German response. By September 5, 1944, German intelligence had compiled a comprehensive report on the Red Ball Express. The findings were devastating for Wehrmacht planning. Every assumption about American logistics had to be rewritten. The report detailed behavior that defied every tenet of German military science. Americans abandoned damaged vehicles instead of repairing them, wasting resources with reckless ease. Drivers stayed awake for days on chemical stimulants, ignoring every rule of human endurance. They used no camouflage, made no attempt at concealment, and exposed entire convoys to the sky. Yet no Luftwaffe airstrike ever came. Mechanical breakdowns hit 30% daily, but the sheer redundancy of vehicles made it irrelevant. Fuel consumption was astronomical, enough to bankrupt any European army. Yet supplies never stopped. Field Marshal Walter Model's reaction betrayed growing despair. If these reports are true, he said, we face not merely a superior army, but a superior civilization. They do not hide because they do not fear us. They waste resources because they possess endless resources. We cannot defeat this with military tactics. The drivers of the Red Ball Express paid a price, invisible to their enemies. Many drove for 72 hours straight, kept awake by exhaustion and Benzedrine, often hallucinating behind the wheel. Over the course of operations, 300 men lost their lives. Trucks collided in dense fog, overturned on cratered roads, or caught fire when overheated engines ignited. And yet, morale never broke. The drivers, most of them African American, understood that they were doing something historic. Denied equal rights in their own homeland. They knew that every mile driven, every ton delivered, was a direct refutation of Hitler's ideology. They were disproving his racial theories through courage, endurance, and skill. Captured German officers later admitted as much. Their testimonies acknowledged the Red Ball Express as one of the most extraordinary logistical feats of the war, an achievement that combined industrial might, human determination, and the will to outpace history itself. Oberst Hans von Luck, captured in September 1944, confessed to his interrogators, We realized our defeat the moment we grasped how your supply system worked. You ignored every established rule. Wasting fuel, discarding vehicles, pushing your drivers to exhaustion, yet triumphed through sheer magnitude. You've transformed warfare into something industrial, far beyond our understanding. The psychological toll on German troops was immense. Wehrmacht soldiers lay awake each night listening to the constant roar of American engines, an endless symphony of motion and abundance. While they counted their remaining 3 bullets per rifle, the Americans seemed to have infinite ammunition. That relentless rumble of trucks became a form of psychological warfare on its own. The machines themselves astonished German engineers. The GMC CCKW2 1-notch 2-ton truck, the workhorse of the Red Ball Express, embodied the very idea of mass production perfection. By the war's end, General Motors had manufactured over 500,000 of these vehicles, surpassing the total number of trucks in the entire German military combined. Each truck carried innovations the Germans had yet to fully implement. All-wheel drive as a standard feature, not a luxury. Automatic tire inflation systems. Waterproofing that allowed fording through 30 inches of water. Engines that ran on low-grade fuel without adjustment. And heating systems that actually worked through the bitter winter. Even more astonishing was the American approach to maintenance. Where German crews meticulously rebuilt engines, American mechanics simply replaced them. Where German supply officers rationed parts, the Americans would abandon an entire vehicle over a minor fault. Instead of a handful of master mechanics, they trained thousands of competent technicians who could complete most repairs quickly and efficiently. As the Allied front advanced eastward, the Red Ball Express adapted with breathtaking speed, shocking German planners accustomed to lengthy logistical preparation. When the original charters route became inadequate, new extensions appeared almost instantly. The White Ball Express from Rouen to Paris, the Green Diamond from Cherbourg to rail transfer points, the Red Lion from Bayeux to Brussels, and the ABC line linking Antwerp, Brussels, and Charleroi. Each new corridor became operational within just 48 hours of planning. German staff officers, used to weeks of detailed coordination, couldn't comprehend such improvisation. The Americans simply repainted signs, reassigned trucks, and started rolling again. The heavy presence of African-American drivers within the Red Ball Express deeply unsettled Nazi racial theorists. German ideology declared black soldiers incapable of technical or disciplined work. Yet these men were performing logistical miracles the Wehrmacht couldn't replicate. The African-American troops themselves recognized the irony. They knew exactly what the Nazis believed about them, and it only strengthened their resolve. Every mile driven, every successful delivery was proof of Hitler's lies. They fought racism not with rifles, but with steering wheels, defeating an ideology through relentless excellence. German prisoners forced to assist in loading Red Ball trucks found their worldview shattered. They worked beside African-American sergeants who could calculate load distribution faster than German engineers, who spoke better English than German instructors, and who treated their captives with fairness and professionalism, in stark contrast to the propaganda they had been fed. The infrastructure that supported the Red Ball Express defied German comprehension. Under active combat conditions, engineers constructed or reinforced 40 bridges, established 15 major fuel depots, built 26 maintenance stations, and even erected 8 temporary cities to support the drivers. All while the convoys were operating at full capacity. When German engineers destroyed the bridge at Montes to choke off American logistics, they estimated it would take at least 6 weeks to rebuild. US engineers constructed a temporary replacement in just 14 hours, while convoys diverted only 8 miles along freshly bulldozed bypass roads. German observers watched in disbelief. The Americans held no lengthy planning meetings, drafted no intricate blueprints. They simply acted. They built faster than German demolition teams could destroy. Overnight, new infrastructure seemed to materialize across the French countryside. One particular feat left German artillery officers speechless, the rate at which the Americans supplied ammunition. U.S. artillery units fired without restraint, a privilege no German battery had enjoyed since 1942. During the reduction of Metz's fortifications in September 1944, the 20th Corps alone fired 100,000 rounds in a single day. The Red Ball Express delivered every shell, plus an additional 20% reserve. In stark contrast, the German defenders of Metz were rationed to 50 rounds per gun per day. The imbalance was staggering. American guns thundered for hours, while German officers struggled to comprehend the logistics behind such firepower. By their own estimates, those bombardments required 50 truckloads of shells every hour. And somehow, the Red Ball delivered it without interruption. The system consumed trucks at a rate that would have crippled any other army. By late September, mechanical wear had reached extraordinary levels. The average truck lifespan dropped from 30,000 miles to just 10,000. Roughly 30% of vehicles were sidelined daily. 500 engines were replaced each week, 10,000 tires consumed, and over 5,000 vehicles destroyed or abandoned. Yet the Red Ball Express never slowed. American production capacity had anticipated such losses. Shipments of new trucks arrived weekly at French ports, and replacement drivers, trained in just 2 days, immediately joined the convoys. German analysts concluded that the Americans were losing more trucks every week than the Wehrmacht had left in all of France. And still, their transport capacity grew. They had accomplished what the Germans once believed could never be done: a supply chain that moved faster than the armies consuming it. French civilians lining the Red Ball Express routes witnessed a spectacle of abundance that shattered years of occupation-era scarcity. The psychological effect on these communities was immediate and profound. Drivers of the Red Ball Express, many of them African Americans, frequently shared their rations with the local population, despite strict military orders forbidding it. Wherever the convoys halted, children would appear, and the drivers would hand out chocolate, cigarettes, and bars of soap. The contrast with the grim austerity of German rule was unmistakable. The Americans gave away freely what the occupiers had rationed to the point of starvation. German intelligence quickly recognized the devastating propaganda consequences. Reports noted, French civilians now regard American victory as inevitable. They point to the endless truck convoys as proof. Resistance activity has risen by 400% along Red Ball routes. Populations once compliant with our presence now openly oppose us. In early September 1944, the Red Ball Express faced its most severe trial. Patton's Third Army had pushed so far east that even this massive supply operation began to strain. Round-trip runs now stretched beyond 700 miles. Drivers collapsed from fatigue. Vehicles broke down faster than they could be repaired, and German observers detected the growing tension. On September 8th, General der Panzertruppe Hans von Manteuffel reported, American supply lines are showing signs of collapse. Convoy spacing has increased from 5 to 15 minutes. Average speed is dropping. This is our chance. But once again, American adaptability defied every German expectation. Within 72 hours, the Red Ball Express reorganized completely, establishing intermediate transfer depots that reduced each leg to 350 miles, rotating drivers to prevent exhaustion, setting up forward maintenance bases, and doubling the number of trucks assigned to the route. By September 12th, deliveries not only recovered but surpassed previous records. What should have been a crippling logistical failure instead made the system more efficient than ever. To reinforce the overland convoys, the Americans introduced another logistical breakthrough the Germans had, dismissed as impossible: large-scale aerial. Resupplied C-47 transport aircraft began ferrying critical cargo directly to frontline units, each carrying roughly 3 tons. On September 16, 1944, German observers counted 900 transport flights in a single day. a staggering 2,700 tons delivered entirely by air. At Stalingrad, the Luftwaffe's maximum effort had managed only 300 tons per day, and even that had nearly destroyed it. The Americans, however, used transport aircraft like flying trucks, unconcerned with escorts, unbothered by fuel limits, and ready to absorb losses through sheer industrial power. The Wehrmacht simply could not compete with this arithmetic of abundance. The Red Ball Express operated on command principles that completely contradicted German military culture. Decisions that would have required a general's approval in the Wehrmacht were made by lieutenants in the field. Sergeants commanded operations larger than those handled by German colonels. This decentralized chaos bewildered German analysts. To their eyes, the American system lacked hierarchy or control. Every lieutenant acted like a general, every sergeant like a colonel. By all logic, it should have collapsed. Instead, it produced efficiency that the rigid German system could never replicate. By October 1944, as captured rail lines were repaired and extended, the need for the Red Ball Express gradually diminished. The operation, initially planned to last just 10 days, had run continuously for 82. In that time, it delivered over 412,000 tons of supplies, covering more than 122 million ton miles. German officers now defending their homeland reflected grimly on the experience. Field Marshal Walter Model wrote in his final report, "It was not American tanks or aircraft that defeated us first. It was their trucks." The Red Ball Express had proven beyond doubt that in modern warfare, logistics is not merely support. It is strategy itself. Even its transition to rail supply represented another marvel of organization. While the Red Ball was still running, American railroad engineers reconstructed over 1,000 miles of destroyed French railway. They laid new tracks faster than German demolition teams could tear them up, often using captured German locomotives and materials. When the final statistics were compiled, the figures defied every German assumption about what industrial logistics could achieve. For 82 relentless days, the operation roared forward, moving 412,193 tons of supplies, covering 222 million ton miles. On average, 5,958 vehicles thundered across Europe, peaking at over 7,000. A total of 23,000 drivers served, burning through 700,000 gallons of fuel every single day. 40,000 tons of ammunition went to Patton's forces alone. 15 million rations were transported, and 135,000 tons of medical supplies delivered. When German officers later reviewed these numbers in captivity, they were stunned. Their pre-war estimates had been based on European standards of logistics. They had tripled their own best performance to guess America's limit. They were off by a factor of 10. But the Red Ball Express achieved something deeper than its statistics. It shattered Germany's faith in its own military superiority. Wehrmacht officers who once sneered at Americans as soft and overly reliant on machines now watched them perform logistical miracles through sheer willpower and industrial might. In prisoner camps, captured Germans would stand silently behind barbed wire, counting the endless line of Red Ball trucks rumbling past. Some broke down in tears. They realized the meaning. Not merely that the US could sustain its armies, but that it could waste more than Germany could even make. They watched their ideology crumble, one truckload at a time. The Red Ball Express also forced the US military to face an internal reckoning. Its success rested heavily on African American troops, still segregated, still denied equality, still barred from combat. When General Eisenhower visited the Red Ball routes in September 1944, he confronted the contradiction directly. His aide, Captain Harry Butcher, noted, "The general stood, watching black drivers who'd been on the road for 20 straight hours. He said, 'These men are winning the war, as surely as any infantrymen. We have many things to reconsider.' Their performance ignited the first real pressure toward desegregation. 3 years later, the military was formally integrated, a direct legacy of those men who proved in France what they already knew. When given tools and trust, they could equal anyone. The Red Ball was their battlefield, and they conquered it. Meanwhile, Nazi racial theorists struggled to rationalize what they saw. SS race science journals abruptly stopped referencing American logistics. The evidence was undeniable and devastating to their ideology. German military engineers later dissected Red Ball operations in detail. The lessons reshaped logistics doctrine worldwide. Volume defeats inefficiency. Redundancy prevents collapse. Decentralized command breeds speed. Standardization amplifies power. And human endurance, though finite, extends far beyond belief. Former German General Franz Halder reflected in 1950, "The Red Ball Express proved that logistics shapes strategy, not the other way around. The Americans grasped this truth. We learned it far too late." Within the 23,000 Red Ball drivers emerged tales of courage the Germans could not comprehend. Verified in official records, they spoke to raw endurance and resolve. Corporal John L. Houston drove for 48 consecutive hours, hauling ammunition to the 2nd Armored Division near Cambrai. He fell asleep at the wheel 3 times, revived each time by fellow drivers, and kept going. Private Booker T. Washington's truck ignited when overheated brakes caught fire while he carried medical supplies. Regulations said to abandon it. Instead, he drove the flaming vehicle 2 miles to a field hospital, leaping free just as the cab was consumed. His delivery saved the lives of wounded soldiers. From both sides. These stories, repeated thousands of times, revealed to watching Germans the true nature of American military culture. One built on individual initiative, calculated risk-taking, and prioritizing mission success over strict adherence to rules. In desperation, the German army tried to build its own version of the Red Ball Express in late 1944. During the Battle of the Bulge, Operation Grafe included plans to use captured American trucks to establish German supply lines. The effort collapsed almost immediately. German drivers couldn't match American convoy speeds. German mechanics couldn't fix US vehicles quickly enough. German fuel reserves couldn't sustain the massive consumption rates. And most crucially, the Germans could not imitate the American mindset, a belief in limitless resources and relentless motion. Oberst Onsteny, the officer overseeing the attempt, reported, "We captured 50 American trucks. Within 1 week, 30 were unusable. The Americans would have simply replaced them. We tried to repair them." That difference explains our defeat. The brutal winter of 1944-45 presented the ultimate challenge for the Red Ball Express. Freezing rain, blizzards, and ice should have halted all-wheeled transport. According to German doctrine, logistics by road became impossible below -10 degrees Celsius. But the Red Ball Express rolled on. Drivers chained their tires, poured alcohol into radiators, and refused to stop. Average speeds fell from 35 to 15 miles per hour, yet tonnage deliveries never ceased. German observers reported seeing convoys crawling through